So I wanted to just start actually with just giving you a little overview of where I was coming from. So I came up with this title. And so basically the story is that I teach business policy and strategy in the business school, and that's our capstone course for the business administration major. And in the course, like any capstone course, it's integrating concepts from previous classes, but within the business school, we have only one major for all our functional areas, all our disciplines. So it's also against discipline. So all the finance students, accounting, marketing, management, we all take the same core, they all have to take the same capstone, and then they have to bring it together. The problem from teaching it is it's like you're reviewing 10 courses at the same time you're teaching new material. It's madness. And so, and then you hope that they'll sort of have this picture in your mind of what it looks like when it's all integrated, because obviously when they're first taught it, they're taught isolated perspectives. So students were struggling. I had to try something new. And I've never been a big fan of the lecture, so that was an easy choice, and I'm sure for most people, no lecture is a good option. What's typical is that they use case discussions, where it's a 20-page case with numbers and storyline and everything, and a lot of data in it. And then you discuss it in class and everything. The problem with it is that students are not good at doing case analysis here, because if I'm the first person to do case method, they have to learn how to do case method to learn from case method. And I can't do that in one course. That's something that really needs to happen over a trajectory of multiple courses. And so we still do case discussion. I just feel that they don't get that holistic perspective, conceptual perspective. I've done newspaper articles in the hope that if it's modern and it will motivate them to actually pay more attention. But you always have this problem that after an hour and a quarter, and let's be honest, closer to 45 minutes if you add all the admin and all the other stuff that goes on, it's just not enough time. So in a case discussion school that is built around this methodology, they would have a 2-hour class, and there would be plenty of time to discuss. We don't have that structure. So it's a lot harder here, even if you did want to do it properly. And then I noticed other things like my students just would look at numbers and there would be this glazed look. And then I would say, well, let's look at them. What did they tell us? What did they tell us? And glazed. And except for the accounting and finance students, who of course are specialized in it, so that's great. But the management students need this information just as much. Or if you're a human resource manager, you have to deal with numbers. Everybody deals with numbers. And so that was a big issue for me. They couldn't use Excel, weak accounting knowledge, which didn't help. And the problem is, our school, if they have D+, they pass. So they can come into my class having D+ in accounting and finance. And I'm asking them to do basics, and the D+ does not represent being able to do basics. And then weak writing skills were the writing course as well in the business school. And so this is was overwhelming to me at a certain point, that I felt that the students were being shortchanged, and that's always an issue. So the obvious thing to try was game simulation, which is actually really popular. A lot of schools do game simulations. And part of it is because then there's peer-to-peer learning, because they work in teams, they don't work as individuals. And ideally, they would work in teams across concentrations. But of course, in reality, it depends on who your friends are, because with the way our students have part-time jobs and stuff, I kind of let them organize their own groups. So there's a lot of options out there. The shoe industry's been around for about 20 years, or 25 years, but it's really cumbersome for the faculty member. It takes ages to learn how to do it, and then it's really a lot of work to manage. Then Globus was created about 6-7 years ago, and it's based on the textbook we were already using. And then there's Industrat, which is really complex, but unfortunately that Industrat is, it's almost more MBA level, because it even includes that you can take over other companies and all this other, really fun stuff, but this is above the pay grade of most undergraduates. So I went with the Globus, and that's kind of where we are. So then I thought we'd just have a look at that. and then I'll go back to how the students respond to it. Okay, so this is what I see. And what's nice about this is I can see all the students' teams, and I can see who's online or not. And I can also go, there's another page where I can see when was the last time they logged in, how much time they spent online. And I can see whether like only one person in the group is doing any work or not. Now this, they sell it to me as a package with the textbook and cases. So the students log in for everything, not just for the game. But still I'm able to track fairly well, I think. And I'll show you first what they see. So these students have made, oh actually maybe I shouldn't show you here because then I can't enter anything. Okay, well, I'll show you the reports first and then we'll go to the MBAs because then I can put stuff in. Okay, so the students play a game, play around, and then they get these reports, and you can see it's almost overwhelming how much reports they get. So this is basically an 8-page report, and it shows their scores, and it will show how they did against each other. So for example, if I go here, under image rating, this is a fairly straightforward concept. How do the customers perceive them? And so they get a rating based on 10 different dimensions, and they're supposed to get 70, and then they're going to be awarded points out of 20 based on how well they do. So there's a lot of feedback on whether or not they're doing well or not. And there's these two scores. So this is against an absolute standard. This is like get the 70, and this is a ranking according to how they do against each other. So there's what's nice about this ranking bit is it increases the sort of competitive fever. And you don't want to be the bottom of the class. You kind of prefer, like not everybody needs to win, not everybody has that equal competitive drive, but at the same time, most people don't want to be at the bottom. So that helps with the incentives, right? But then also they get rewarded for just performing well, independent of each other's things. And then they get all kinds of reports, like how many products were sold in the industry, did it change from the previous year, what was the average wholesale price, all this kind of stuff. It's a lot of numbers, isn't it? And so what's so interesting is how overwhelmed the students are when they first see this, and then I'll go through and I'll say, well, this to me looks like a funny number. What do you think is going on here? And then I walk them through reading it as a story. And so, for example, this is supposed to be a growth industry. It's supposed to grow 10 to 15% per year, and yet shipments went down 20% in their first round of decisions they made. So they've clearly made a mistake in how they've run the game. So then I'll say to them, well, there's something going on here. What do you think is the problem? And then we can talk through, you know, is it the pricing? Is it the quality? Did you make enough product? And how they can look at the different numbers to figure out what is actually causing the decrease in actual numbers shipped. When you guys look at this, does this kind of look an overwhelming amount of numbers to you?
Depends if I knew what it was about.
Yeah, fair enough. And you would have more context. So as you can, basically two product lines, entry level and multi-featured. And there's 4 regions in the world that they're selling in. And they get to make decisions about marketing, product design, how much they should make, so how many products they're going to tell the factory to make, how are they going to pay the people who work in the factory, what are they going to do for the community, so the corporate social responsibility stuff. Are they going to borrow money, or are they going to pay back loans? Are they going to pay dividends to the shareholders? So they have this whole raft of decisions that they need to make. But basically what they're trying to do is compete in the 4 regions to sell the most cameras. That's the sort of fundamental shape of this game. And so then they get all kinds of reports. that tell them how they're doing in comparison to their colleagues. So here, for example, this is just going to be showing as the years progress, it's going to show how the price point moves and how the quality of the product moves, and they'll get this information and decide whether they want to bring the price down or up or, you know, whatever. I like the fact that my students are optimistic about demand and they raise the prices. So that's one kind of information they get, and then the other kind of information they get is analysis comparing the companies against each other. And this is strictly from a marketing perspective. And the logic of the game is if it's a publicly traded company, some information will be available to all companies. So within the game, they get a lot of good information about what's out there, so marketing and financial information. And they don't get good information about factories and paying people and stuff like that. That's going to be more clouded in doubt. So here they're able to compare. So each letter, each column is a different company, and then they're able to compare the prices, the number of models, what kind of warranty they have. So there's all these different aspects of the marketing decisions. And if it's highlighted in yellow, it means they didn't make enough product, they sold out, which is really important in business. You don't want to stall out because that means you lose money, right? And then underneath it, the students get a visual, which helps some people and other people, as I'm sure you've experienced, not so much. And this is just mapping how the companies are in relation to each other in a marketing sense. And then finally, some recommendations for what they need to improve and what's good in their strategy. So from my perspective, I can go to any company perspective, I can go to any region or any quarter, I can get all that. And plus I also have my administrator's report. This is all I have to do. I just look at the reports. I don't have to manage a damn thing. This is what makes it really good. I have the option to change some parameters if I want to, but as soon as you start changing the parameters, then you become unique compared to the world. And now, if I just do all the defaults, then my students get put into global rankings on their performance. And I've had many times had my students in the top 50 or top 100 for the world. So there'll be about 3,000 teams playing the game at the same time, and they're not really competing against each other, but it's nice for them to feel they're doing as well as students at other schools. The actual dynamics, the way the program works, is each company is playing against each other in the classroom. So it doesn't go outside the classroom. So there's either 4 companies or 8 companies or 12 companies, and they're just competing against each other. So this is kind of fun because you show up in class and you sort of, who's at the top, who's at the bottom, and you know, a little teasing back and forth. But this is about all I need to do. And the other good thing they do is they do give me company history decisions, so that if a team starts having a big problem, like I had that students would be really sick and miss a decision or something got messed up, then I was able to go back and fix things, which I rarely do, but you have to have that capability, I think. Okay, so let's look at what the students see. And for that, I'll go in here. No, sorry, I said I would go to the MBAs.
I have one question.
Yeah.
So is the program set up so it is a whole environment in which they're competing, or it's completely isolated and it's only what they do with respect to each other?
It's what they do with respect to each other, yeah.
So there's no,
it's a little stylized.
There's not going to be a global recession that pops up?
No, they do get foreign exchange shock.
Okay.
So Latin America is very volatile in this game.
Okay.
So if your dominant market share is in Latin America, you could get really hit one year and then the next year have a 20% bonus. That's really the main way in which the external environment is handled. So yeah, it's very stylized. The other way it's stylized is that when the game starts, all the teams are absolutely equal, with the exception of which market they have dominant market share. So that's obviously never the way it is. That's very stylized. Okay. So here we have a company. And this is the screen the students see. So the first screen they see is product design. And everything that's in gray, they can click on it and change. And then the white boxes, they can change the numbers. And then underneath it will be the projections. So for example, if I were to say dramatically increase research and development for multi-featured cameras, I just enter that, then some of the numbers underneath will change. If I dramatically increase the megapixels on the camera, you'll notice I went from 2.5 stars to 3 stars. So that says that my rating is increased, my quality rating. What's interesting about that is the immediacy of the feedback, and I think that's really a valuable thing in a game, when they do something and then they see something. Of course, this is just projections. It's not what really will happen, because as you said, it's in a closed environment. They're competing against each other. This is just projections with the game algorithm. And then in marketing, they're making all these decisions related to the marketing strategies for the different regions. And then they have to decide how much product to make, and they do the entry level and the multi-featured separately. And then here they're figuring out how much to pay people, so compensation and training decisions. And then underneath it, deciding whether to hire and fire people. And the default is that if they don't hire people and they don't assign overtime and they still have product to make, then it will automatically be outsourced. So you can see, for example, along, let me see if I can, this line, it says PAT, so that's production something teams anyways, they're the teams, production teams. Needed to achieve assembly schedule, it says 79, and there's 80 people employed. So one of the decisions they would have to make is whether to fire the team that's not got anything to do. Or you get to the third quarter, and then this is Christmas time, so they need to make 159, I need 159 teams, they only have 80. Then do you hire 79 or not? Or do you go to outsourcing just for the Christmas season? So these are the kinds of decisions they're making on this page. And then they also, bonuses for quality and all that kind of stuff. One of the things they have to think about is productivity. And they get to deal with that under the corporate social responsibility as well. So they can have a cafeteria and on-site childcare, which makes people happy, and then they work better. And you can do other things like green and energy efficiency and supplier code, all that kind of stuff. Some students choose to pay nothing towards this. Sorry.
How fast is the time on this? Is it real time or is it accelerated time?
In what sense do you mean?
Well, you talked about the Christmas season and so on.
Oh, no, so they do decisions once a year's worth of decisions at a time.
Okay.
And so
And then they see how that plays out.
and then they see how that plays out, and then they do the next year. So it's a stage game.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Are you making decisions as you go along, or you're just saying this is what
I
you're
could set
doing?
it up that
Oh,
way,
you could?
but that would mean that the students would have to be on campus more,
Yeah.
and that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I do it once a week, which is each week represents a year.
Yeah.
And then as they get to know the game, after let's say about 4 or 5 rounds of decision making, then we'll do 2 a week because they get faster.
Yeah, they're doing it.
And then, and the reason I like to run the game longer instead of just stopping it earlier is that around year 11, the industry, the market matures, and the growth slows down, and then mistakes are more costly. And that's just, I think, it's nice when it grows and you can make big mistakes and still make money, but that's not really so it's good for them to experience that kind of reality hitting.
Yeah.
And then I have the finance. The finance thing is actually very easy because really what they're doing is they're looking at, this is what they should be doing, of course they don't know that. They're looking at their cash flow balance and deciding whether they need to borrow money or pay it back, and whether to give dividends to the shareholders and whether to sell stock. So it's really a very fundamental debt equity model. And there's very few decisions for them except that they should pay back loans if they have cash. Oh, that's the other volatility is the interest rates. You were at the, yeah. Interest rates and foreign exchange will vary from year to year. So somebody could take on a lot of debt and then all of a sudden the interest rates goes to 10% and then there's like, whoa, baby. I hope that worked out. So that's basically how the game works.
How many years do you usually get through in the course of?
I go from 6 to 14 usually. The last one, I have the students make a decision, then they do a presentation to each other about their strategies and what didn't work and why they think it didn't work and why they thought they won or lost or whatever. And they really get graded a lot on that because that's where I'm kind of measuring how much they understood about what's going on, right?
Analysis of
Yeah, so you made a big mistake, but do you understand what you did wrong, And then, but then what we do is I can manually run a decision at any time. So I'll do the deadline for after class, but then I'll run it right in class. And we, just have a laugh and that's it. So they make a decision before they do their presentations and then we run it after the presentations.
Can you do it in conjunction with the presentations? Like we should have made this decision. Can you go, well, look what happens if you did it? Did we do it?
It's kind of hard. You can roll back decisions. But I suppose I could do it in a presentation. I've never done it. Yeah, I suppose I could.
It's interesting when somebody says, well, we should have just done this. Like, let's test that hypothesis.
Yeah. That would be, but then I couldn't do what I do now, which is run it at the end. I would have to actually be able to roll it back. But yeah, I can roll things back, but it rolls back for everybody.
Yeah.
So then I would want to be in a situation where not everybody's jumping in and changing parameters, right?
No, but you could.
But I think that would be a great thing.
Made the same decision, and you did that one thing. What would happen?
Yeah. In a classroom situation, I could do that.
I'm just thinking about how you can
create the learning out of it. Yeah.
Because it's fine to say pie in the sky. Well, I should have done this.
Yeah, but then what would have actually happened?
What would have happened if you?
And right now what I'll do, one of the things I'll do is I'll ask the other teams, if they did that, what do you think would have happened? Because then they would have responded to that, right? Because that's what gaming is. It's you did that, or I think you're going to do that, so I'm going to do this. Yeah. I could enter a whole bunch of decisions, but what I think it would be fun to do is talk about different courses and think about how, at least this was what I planned, but we don't have to do it that way. A small group, we can do whatever we want. Talk about how other courses could use a simulation and where to find them and stuff. I did look online for a bunch of different things and I found some stuff, but we can talk about that. So let me just go back for a second to my PowerPoints, but they're almost done, so. Oh. So basically what happens is about 70% of the students these days are engaged instantly. And this is partly a self-selection bias because there's 6 or 7 or 8 sections and the students know that I'm the one who runs the game. So now there's a selection bias of people who want to play the game who come to my class. So it used to be closer to 60% engagement instantly, and then I would have to work on the motivation. So fortunately, that part of my job has gotten easier because the ones who show up are the ones who've heard about it and they think it'll be a lot of fun. Nonetheless, there's always some students who have to learn the hard way because they just picked based on, oh, 130, that'll work for me. And then they show up and it's like, who is this Dr. de Koning? Oh my God. So
What am I in for?
one thing that I do is it's 25% of their grade just for the game. And so that's a significant portion, and they start to see that if they don't make an effort, that this will look bad really, really quickly. The other thing is that happens is the team dynamics. So I typically will do teams of 2 or 3 just because the coordination problems of larger groups. So by having the smaller groups, I have less team problems. The one problem that I have not resolved is when one person does all the work. So this is like the opposite of the freeloader problem, because the freeloader problem, you can kick them in the butt. There's ways to do that. But if somebody in the group is doing all the work and not letting the others in, is really a very awkward situation. And my experience has been that those are the groups that die at around year 10 when the market starts growing, because they've got 3 people, only one person knows how to play the game, and at a certain point you really need to think about what to do next, and one person by themselves usually is not very successful in that environment. My experience, that they burn out and there's nobody to step up because they've pushed out everybody else. So when it's the MBAs, of course, I make it their responsibility to deal with that problem, because I think that's life. You just have to deal with that problem. And I help them, I coach them, but I make them deal with it. But with the undergrads, it can sometimes take some, I've actually broken up teams at times. Just take that person who's dominating and put them somewhere else, so that the ones who are left behind are forced to do it because there's nobody else to do it.
How do you assess that?
But partly because I can track activity. So if they're actually not on, then I know they're not on. They're not doing their homework. They're not doing Globus. They're not doing anything. But also it's remarkable, you can tell in the classroom. I mean, the interpersonal dynamics, it's just, the groups sit together because they have to do things together in class, like around Globus type issues. And then, so they sit together, but then they don't talk to each other, and there's this coldness. It's like, you think professors don't see anything and don't hear anything. I know what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't always reveal that I know, because it's sometimes okay for them to just work it out themselves. But I usually know these ones, they emerge pretty quickly. One of the other ways that I deal with it is I say that you can have free coaching. I'll help you with any aspect of the game, but nobody can come by themselves. You have to come as a team. And I will bend over backwards to make my schedule available to you if that's the issue, but you have to come as a team. And so that is a way of forcing them to work together. Doesn't always work out, but you know, you have all these little mechanisms to kind of, because if it is a serious freeloader, it can be a huge issue. I had a hyper-privileged young man from Chad last semester, or no, 2 semesters ago, and I pretty much gave him a D+, I think, basically failed him. In his mind, it was just horrifying because he'd never gotten below an A, and of course Canvas told him he was going to get a B-, and we know Canvas is really accurate, right? But he didn't do anything. And it was obvious to me, and eventually his team kind of got fed up and told me. And I have them write contracts at the beginning of the semester, and the contract includes what do you do when somebody's not doing any work. And I tell them the divorce is an option. That you can kick someone off your team. That is legit. If you've got a good process in place that's fair and articulate and is based on discussion and trying to solve problems. But if you can't resolve the problem, I'll let you kick the person off the team. And about every 2nd or 3rd semester, it happens in one team. And then that person gets 0 for Globus because they're not on a team. And then they could pass the course just barely. In one case, I had a student was kicked off of 3 teams. I mean, how clear is it that you're a freeloader, that nobody wants you? Like they're all, you know how our students are, they're so gracious to each other, they're so kind. If somebody has a learning disability, then somebody else steps up. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. They're really kind to each other in subtle ways, like not mushy, but, and then, so then when somebody gets kicked off of one team, I've often had it that they'll be invited to join another team. And usually that being kicked off the first team is enough, right?
No wake-up call.
It's a wake-up call. It's not a joke, and Professor DeConing really insists that you work. And so then they start working, and I've had complete turnarounds that were just wonderful, and they really learned a lot, and it showed on their test results. It showed everywhere. It was fantastic. But sometimes they don't, and then they get kicked off again because they're really dead weight, and the group just can't cope with it anymore. So I've seen it all. But mostly, so from a point of view of my time as a teaching tool, besides the times when I've got a team that really is overwhelmed by the numbers because they're all like fashion majors from Marion College or something like that. I did have that once. And they were darling, but they were really out of their depth. So that did take a little extra of my time, but they were so sincere, I didn't really mind. And they did pull it off, and they did figure it out. So they learned a lot. So it was worth it. So that what I would say it's the negative. But in terms of the game itself, there's no work for me. The students make the decision. 15 minutes later, there's the email. Boom, there's the results. Carry on. That's all I have to worry about. So on the numbers, even my Marion College fashion majors got to the point where they would come into my office and say, look, professor, and they're pointing at rows of numbers. It's like, oh, I can't believe it. It's so great. It means they can read numbers, you know? So, so in terms of how all the stories that it tells, it's marketing stories, it's operation stories, it's finance stories, it's stories about the future, it's stories about accounting. So all those different aspects, they learn how to look at the numbers and put together a storyline. So there we go. I think I got all that without using the slides. You can rearrange the slides when you put them in together. Explain, yeah, so coaching is the coaching is the biggest issue here in terms of my time. And that's not the same for every semester. That varies a lot from semester to semester. Okay, so I thought we should have a discussion, and I really don't know enough about everybody to be able to say what we should discuss. So maybe we could start by doing introductions, and then you could say why you thought it might be interesting to come today, and then that might lead to a really fruitful discussion. Would you like to start?
Okay, my name is Teaching, and I think I'm kind of misunderstanding or attending this.
Oh, okay, no problem. That's fine.
I'm Rachel Delacroix from the education department. I do a lot of advising, but the main part of what I do is help the education majors prepare to get licensed to be teachers. And the math, general curriculum, MTEL, which is a test if you want to be an elementary school teacher that
You have to pass it, yeah.
And our pass rate is horrendous. So
Okay, yeah. So you're
looking
thinking
for
maybe a game environment.
games for different areas of math that they would be tested on.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm Judith Birchstead from the biology department. And I have a 16-year-old, so I have watched gaming happen in large quantities and seen how engaging it was. My son had some learning disabilities. It was very difficult for him to write, to spell, and he did not want to type, but he has difficulty moving his hand to make the movements of writing. And he was very resistant to learning how to type. He learned how to type interacting with other people on games. When he wanted to make a comment,
He had to learn.
he had to do it quickly enough, or the person he wanted to communicate with was gone.
Yeah. So
And
we
so
incentivized him.
I saw how, and now he types like a whiz. He still can't handwrite for anything, but the world caught up with him, and it's all.
It doesn't matter anymore, does it?
Yeah. And so I built on that. I had a neurological disorder myself. I had facial paralysis, which I mostly overcame.
Like a palsy, what is it, Bell's palsy,
Bell's
that type of
palsy,
thing?
Yeah, it was not that, but it
It was
was.
something like that, yeah.
And so it affected my hearing, it affected my balance. And I went through physical therapy, and basically still had horrible balance. So a day like today, I would stay home so that I wouldn't
Just to
fall
be
down.
safe.
Yeah. So, hand on the wall to write on the blackboard. Because if I'm watching my hand moving, I
Boom,
fall.
yeah.
So last, 147 days ago, I got a Wii balance board.
Mm.
And
So not that long ago,
no, literally.
and it's helping a lot.
And I caught myself demonstrating how cetaceans give birth by just spinning around on one foot in the front of my class.
And you suddenly
And
realize
I went, wait a minute, this gaming thing,
it works.
it worked on me. I saw it because I had the facial paralysis, 10 years ago. So I've struggled with bad
For a long
balance for 10
time.
years. In 146 days,
It shifted.
dramatically increased it. So now my son who does Tai Chi and has since he was 7, 8, my balance is better than his doing some of these games. And I thought,
Incredible.
yeah, and I'm an old fart. I'm not spending, I'm not into that. I want to play this game so much.
And it's still working.
And it's working because it clicks in, it senses what I'm doing that's right and rewards me for it when I don't know it was any better than the other 5 times I've done it.
See, that's interesting, and I think that works in the Globus game as well, is the feedback, the instant
Yep.
feedback. I think
Yep.
that's really critical, and that's part of learning, isn't it, to have feedback in a timely manner.
And so it's this algorithm that says, I can't tell the difference.
But it can.
It can tell the difference. And there are times I go on and do the balance training and go, I thought that was pretty good. And I
It's
get
really
this
bad.
smarmy voice saying, well, you're a little bit shaky today, aren't you? And
Oh, she's so
shut up.
charming.
Shut up.
When they weigh you and they go, "Ooh, you're a beast."
Yeah, with that sweet
The hell
voice.
with you.
Yeah. Do I hear a fitness tip? Not now, I know.
Exactly.
So I wanted to see and see someone who uses this kind of thing in their teaching, because I've never done it
Mm.
in a teaching environment, but I'm seeing how much it works.
I don't think we use it enough in the business school. I know from other schools I've worked at that we have even more opportunities to do it. So
Yeah.
there's a very famous one called Mark Strat, which is a competitive marketing game. And a lot of schools just do it every year.
Yeah.
Everybody does it, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm Vicki Riccadello, and I'm from computer science. I teach the ITC 117 course, which is the course that School of Business students take.
Mm.
And I know that gamification is one of the fastest trends in instructional technology today, and for very, very good reason, because it does keep students
Engaged.
It keeps them motivated. And one of the reasons why I came today, besides a general overall interest, in gamification, is I think it's important for my students to understand that there are different ways that they can learn things,
Mhm.
and that games
Yeah.
are one way that they can.
If they're frustrated with the lecture, they shouldn't think they can't learn.
Exactly.
Yeah, they should have that greater confidence.
So I think, it's important to give them an awareness of this.
I think that's a good point. So if we, back to the students, I found this website from Michigan State University that has, it's the portal towards all links for running simulations, and it has everything in here. And I guess I should maybe forward it to you. You can forward it to everyone here, or we can make it part of the thing.
What's the beginning of the website, just the?
It's, yeah. So this is internal resources at Michigan State. It's part of their teaching and learning resources, and you can see it. They have multiple sections. So this is really on simulations and gaming. And what was interesting to me as I went through it is I didn't notice very many multi-stage games, except in business and in political science. and peace studies, I guess you could say they're overlapping. So a lot of the games that I found were role play games where, you know, you would have some students representing villagers and some would represent community workers and some would represent a local company and all these kinds of games. But there were a lot of science ones too, and just to give you an example of one of the sites that I found through Michigan State. This one is at University of Colorado in Boulder. And so they have even got simulations by grade level, so you could maybe investigate the elementary school ones and see if they would be of any use to you. So this is specifically physics, but physics involves math to a certain extent, so it might be somewhat overlapping. Oh, yeah, sorry, there's math there. I did look at this one, and basically what it's doing, let's see if we can run it. What it's doing is it's showing graphic representation. I think I have to install it, unfortunately. It's supposed to run now. Oh, Java, there we go. So what's nice is how they set this up where they talk about what the topics and all that kind of stuff, and they have a teacher's guide and everything. Okay, so here you got this guy, and then you can make him, you can decide where he should be and everything, so you can just drag him. Oh, this is loud. Oops, sorry, not mute screen, mute. So we're not interested in the sounds, right? And if you go to the charts, it shows how the charts represent the different things. So you can use a tool like that for students to see the connection between charts and between times. You communicating out order?
Yeah, because they have a class.
Oh, at 4:30?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so we should probably get out of here. So this was an example. It's not a multi-stage thing like what I'm doing in my class, but there are a lot of these little tools on the web.
Cool.
Do you think that kind of thing might work?
Yeah, I was just looking through the different choices of what there were for activities.
And you can, and you can frame it as you could use this to teach, but why don't you do it yourself first?
Yeah, they know they have to do it themselves first.
So hopefully then they'll figure out and actually learn some of the stuff they need to know.
But you don't have to tell them, you're actually doing it so they learn how to do the math.
No, it's.
But it's really basic stuff. Would luminosity help, for example? Doesn't? You've
No,
tried that?
No. Well, I played it. It's not what I'm looking for. A lot of them is basically things like, algebra, geometry, statistics, probability that they should have learned in high school,
Oh, okay.
middle school, high school, and somehow.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of that going on based on what I have in the class. Like I'll do a fraction and then I'll say a
They have to
percentage,
know this
and they
word
just don't
test.
understand that they're the same
You can't get a D-
thing.
on the MTEL.
No, or a D plus for that
Not
matter.
even- Not even a C.
Well, I'm glad for the kids.
Yeah, me too.